Hey guys, tonight we're sliding sideways into a story you didn't know you needed. The medieval English poppy milk addiction crisis. That's right, move over, coffee, forget energy drinks. Imagine winding down after a hard day of subsistence farming with a mug of, well, let's call it nighttime medieval oat milk with a suspiciously sleepy aftertaste. Before we get weirdly cozy with the past, take a second to like, subscribe, or comment, but only if you actually enjoy these journeys through the worst and sometimes dopiest corners of history. Seriously, drop a comment and tell me if you're listening from your bed, your couch, or a small, medieval-themed fort constructed out of laundry. Now, dim the lights, click on a fan for that sweet, medieval white noise, and get yourself so comfortable that even your back pain forgets to nag. So, have you ever wondered what people did before Ambien? What kind of wellness hacks flourished before Goop? Did medieval peasants microdose on poppies? Or just go all in for the full sleep like the Dead Experience? How exactly did an entire society decide that milking a flower for bedtime beverage was the normal way to survive the sound of your neighbour's plague cough through paper-thin wattle walls? Was poppy milk England's first wellness trend? Or just an excuse for a nation to nap through its problems? Did poppy milk really make you sleep? Or did it just make you forget you still owed rent to a man called the Earl of Dampsocks? And would you, in all honesty, survive a single night in a world where the evening's entertainment is watching your friend slowly nod off into a medieval coma after one mug too many? Congratulations, you've just woken up in England, 1386. Your mattress is straw, your nightcap is suspiciously creamy, and the only thing standing between you and another lice-filled sunrise is a steaming, faintly narcotic cup of poppy milk. Good luck. Let's start at the root, or, in this case, the flower head. Poppies aren't native to England, but somehow, by the late 1300s, they're everywhere. In gardens, monastery, apothecaries, and the slightly damp corner behind your neighbour's house, where nothing else will grow. Like all great vices, poppy milk arrived quietly, and then refused to leave. So, how did a plant with suspiciously droopy petals and a habit of knocking people out for hours find itself at the centre of medieval English life? Like most historical mysteries, the answer is equal parts accidental trade, medical optimism, and let's just see what happens if I boil this and drink it. Some say it was the Crusaders who first brought the seeds back, because if there's one thing that says holy war, it's a souvenir packet of sleep-inducing wildflowers. Others point to wandering monks and herbalists, whose job descriptions included meddle with foreign plants and invent the world's first sleepover beverage. It started out innocent enough. Medieval England, always on the lookout for a new miracle cure, fell instantly in love with the idea that this exotic flower could solve everything from toothaches to teething. Monasteries latched onto the poppy like a medieval influencer to a new skincare line. It soothes pain, the monks claimed. It quiets babies. It makes Brother Aethelwulf stop talking about his bunions for a blessed minute. Before you could say unexpected side effects, poppies were a staple in every medicinal garden from Canterbury to Yorkshire. Of course, nothing spreads faster in a village than a good rumour, except maybe a plant that helps you sleep through your neighbour's late-night goat problems. Soon, poppy seeds were traded under tables and over fences, quietly sprinkled into backyard gardens where experimental horticulture looked suspiciously like avoiding insomnia. No one was really sure how strong their homebrew was supposed to be. But, in true medieval fashion, that didn't stop anyone from drinking it. If you had a spare patch of soil, or even just a broken pot, you were growing poppies, and if you weren't, your neighbour was growing them for you. By the end of the 14th century, poppy heads were everywhere. drying in kitchen rafters, hanging from bedposts like weird medieval dream catchers, and tucked into the pockets of anyone who hoped to sleep through the next thunderstorm. The flower was admired for its beauty, but more for its ability to turn a noisy night into blissful oblivion. In some towns, it was considered polite to offer your guests a warm mug of poppy milk before they left, mostly so you wouldn't have to walk them home while they ranted about taxes. But let's not pretend this was a coordinated public health campaign. No one in medieval England held a symposium about the responsible use of poppy products. If you could grow it, you did. If you couldn't, you borrowed some from your neighbor and pretended not to notice the side effects. Word spread fast, and recipes evolved even faster. Sometimes the local priest warned that poppy milk might invite the devil into your dreams. Other times, he just asked for the strongest batch and blamed his nap on vigorous prayer. It didn't take long for poppies to show up in the written records. The first mentions are in dusty monastic journals. Administered a draught of poppy milk to Brother Godwin, silence achieved. Hallelujah. After that, references crop up in village bylaws, church sermons, and the occasional angry letter to the king. Your Majesty, the peasants are all asleep again, please advise. The poppy had officially arrived, and, like all great wellness trends, it refused to go away quietly. So, next time you see a poppy nodding in the wind, remember, it's not just a pretty flower. In medieval England, it was the original nightcap, an accidental export, and a reminder that history's greatest hits often start in the garden and end with an entire country just a little too well rested. It's the 14th century. Your bed is 80% straw, 20% mysterious scuttling sounds, and you're desperately trying to forget that your walls are technically edible. You'd do anything for a good night's sleep. Enter poppy milk, the medieval answer to melatonin, minus the customer support hotline. Let's set the mood. It's past sunset, which means your entire household is gathered around a smoky hearth, squinting at each other through the haze like you're living inside a giant, slightly damp chimney. Someone's telling a story about a goose that ate a priest's sock, but you can barely hear it over the sound of a draft howling through the door and your neighbor's goat trying to break in, again. You want to sleep, but your brain has other ideas. Did I lock the barn? Is that mold? Or is that just last year's bread with aspirations? Will I wake up with all my toes? Medieval insomnia isn't just can't stop thinking about tomorrow's meeting. It's a full sensory assault. The floor under your straw mattress is cold enough to convince you you're sleeping on a glacier. If you roll over, you might land on a beetle the size of a baby shoe. Every noise is either a rodent, a relative, or some combination of both. And because medieval England doesn't believe in personal space, you're sharing your sleeping area with your family, your livestock, and probably several generations of fleas who think of you as a timeshare. And don't even think about getting up to pee. The outhouse is a treacherous journey through darkness, mud, and what is either a puddle or a very ambitious ditch. If you're lucky, you'll make it back without stepping on a chicken, waking the baby, or falling into the neighbor's cabbage patch. If not, well, congratulations, you're now that guy who everyone talks about in the morning. Sleep is already elusive, and shame does nothing to help. Now add in the anxiety. Your crops are late, your debts are due, and you're 90% sure you saw a tax collector lurking behind the hedgerow last night. The local priest says prayer will soothe you. But prayer can only do so much when your house is one good windstorm away from being a pile of nostalgic splinters. So you lie awake, staring into the dark, counting the cracks in the ceiling, and wondering if insomnia is just part of the peasant experience. This is where poppy milk enters the scene, like a medieval superhero, minus the cape, plus a heavy risk of grogginess. The first time someone offers you a mug, you're skeptical. The second time, you'll drink anything if it means not having to hear your brother snore like a haunted accordion. It doesn't take long for poppy milk to become a nightly ritual. Warm up the milk, stir in the poppy extract, hope you don't accidentally take the village herbalist's extra-strength version, and settle in for a few hours of blissful oblivion. Suddenly, the straw doesn't poke as much. The wind is just a pleasant lullaby. The goat's late-night break-in attempts are nothing compared to the strange, floaty dreams you're having about dancing turnips and a plague-free tax season. Sure, you might wake up a little fuzzy, and sometimes it's hard to remember if you actually fed the pigs or just dreamed about it. But at least you're not lying awake counting fleas. But as with any miracle cure, there are side effects. Some nights, you sleep too deeply and miss your shift stoking the hearth. Other times, you wake up in the wrong bed, or worse, in the wrong house. Poppy milk is not subtle. You might startle awake at dawn with a mouthful of straw, and the realization that you promised your neighbor you'd help thatch his roof in exchange for his special batch. Suddenly, you're in a medieval sleep debt spiral. Yet, for all its quirks, poppy milk is the closest thing medieval peasants have to self-care. It's not perfect, but it's the only barrier between you and the relentless insomnia of a world that never seems to quiet down. So you drink, you dream, and for a few precious hours, you almost forget that your pillow is made of hay and your alarm clock is a rooster with no respect for boundaries. Sleep tight, if you can. Here's how you make it. Steal some poppy heads from your lord's garden, mash them up, simmer with whatever passes for milk, and hope your ratios are not lethal. Recipes are passed down like family secrets, except instead of cookies, it's here's how not to accidentally sleep through the harvest. Let's start with the basics. Step 1. You need poppy heads, and you're not getting them from the market. No medieval peasant is strolling through the village square waving a bouquet of sleep flowers. Instead, you have to get creative. Maybe your aunt knows a monk who grows them for medicinal reasons. Maybe you spot some in the manor's garden, and you're feeling brave, reckless, or just very, very tired. Either way, if you get caught, you're in for a lecture from the bailiff about stealing the Lord's property, plus a healthy dose of suspicion about what you're doing with all those flower heads. Once you have your poppies, it's time for the medieval version of experimental kitchen science. The process starts by cracking open the seed pods, sticky, milky, and weirdly satisfying, scraping out the precious goop and trying not to get any in your eye. Some people swear by drying the heads first. Others insist fresh is best, because nothing says goodnight like unpasteurized plant mystery juice. It's a recipe with a margin of error roughly the size of a sheepdog. Next comes the milk, and let's use the term milk very loosely. In a good year, you have something close to what we'd recognize: cow, goat, or if you're desperate, that one sheep who won't tell the difference. But more often than not, you're working with yesterday's leftovers, thinned out with a bit of water to stretch it, maybe slightly sour, definitely at room temperature. If you're lucky, you find some honey to mask the flavor and give it that extra medieval gourmet touch. If not, well, just hold your nose and power through. Now, combine your mashed poppy with the milk. Stir it in an old pot and set it over the fire. The trick is to simmer, not boil, unless you want the whole house to smell like herbal regret and your poppy milk to curdle into a crime against beverages. Medieval recipes are less measure carefully and more good luck. The right dose is, loosely, enough to take the edge off, but not enough to make you sleep until the next feast day. One village granny claims the perfect ratio is 3 heads for a baby, 5 for a grown man. And don't even ask about Uncle Oswald. No one writes these things down. Instead, you learn by trial, error, and the occasional incident of waking up at dinner with no memory of breakfast. Of course, everyone has their secret ingredient. Some add a pinch of ground herbs, valerian, lavender, or whatever happened to survive last winter's frost. Some sweeten it with syrup or slip in a splash of ale if they're feeling festive. And then there are the serious types who insist you must bless the pot by stirring it only with a hazel stick, or recite a prayer to Street Dymphna, patron saint of sleep-deprived insomniacs. It's part potion, part ritual, and part ongoing village dare. Once it's ready, the ritual of serving begins. You pour it into whatever cup you can find, usually a chipped mug or a wooden bowl that's seen better centuries, and pass it around. Everyone gives it a sniff, sips cautiously, and waits for the familiar, heavy-eyed warmth to kick in. The bravest drinkers slam theirs back like they're downing a medieval shot of espresso, while the cautious ones nurse it, eyes darting for signs of unplanned napping. Results are immediate. If you've done it right, your entire household is softly snoring within the hour, dreaming of plague-free summers and tax collectors who move to France. If not, you spend the night wide awake, staring at the rafters, questioning every life choice since you started brewing flowers for sleep. So, the next time you try a complicated recipe and worry about getting it wrong, spare a thought for medieval peasants who risked both taste and consciousness with every mug of poppy milk. Culinary adventure? More like medieval roulette with extra foam. Every monastery worth its salt and honey had a little patch of poppies. The monks, England's original white-coat pharmacists, brewed poppy milk for everything from toothaches to existential dread. If you asked for a bedtime prayer, you got a blessing and a cup. Sometimes just the cup. Picture yourself shuffling into the shadowy, incense-thick halls of a 14th century monastery. The air smells like candle wax, old books, and that slightly alarming tang of whatever Brother Gregory just boiled in his cauldron. You approach the apothecary, really just a cramped back room full of jars, mysterious roots, and enough dried flowers to make a florist weep. And you explain your problem. Sleeplessness? Persistent pain? Spiritually induced sadness? No worries. The monks have a solution for everything, and 9 times out of 10, that solution is, have you tried a little poppy milk? Monasteries were the medieval world's health centers. Part clinic, part urgent care, part experimental lab run by men in robes with absolutely zero liability insurance. Monks took their medicine seriously. They grew herbs, read ancient texts, and debated whether a moderate dose meant a spoonful or just until the patient stops complaining. In a time before actual pharmacists, you had bearded men with a basic understanding of Latin, a lot of spare time, and a willingness to try anything once. Preferably on someone else. The poppy patch was always tucked away near the medicinal beds of mint, sage, and maybe a suspiciously large cluster of wormwood. Poppy cultivation required a light touch. Too much shade, and you got weak flowers. Too much sun, and the monks spent the summer sleepwalking through vespers. The head gardener, usually the oldest monk who could still bend over without swearing, would tend the poppies with a mixture of prayer, compost, and possibly a little light bribery to keep the rabbits away. After all, the last thing you needed was a monastery full of narcoleptic wildlife. Harvest Day was a minor event. Monks in brown habits and sandals would walk the rows, cutting pods and discussing whether Street Benedict ever dealt with this much pollen up his nose. The poppy heads were dried on racks, crushed in mortars, and stored in earthenware jars behind the emergency wine. Recipes were scribbled in margins. For sleeplessness, steep in goat's milk. For heartbreak, add a pinch of honey and 2 Hail Marys. If you're wondering who tested these mixtures, the answer is anyone who lost at monastery dice or fell asleep during matins. And then came the customers. Villagers lined up at the gate, clutching ailments and hoping for a miracle. Or, failing that, a really good nap. The monks listened to symptoms, offered a bit of scripture, and ladled out the medicine with the solemnity of men who absolutely knew what they were doing, but were making it up as they went along. Poppy milk was a cure-all, a painkiller, a please stop talking about your cousin's bunion in liquid form. You drank it, crossed yourself, and waited for the soothing cloud to descend. Of course, there was mayhem. Doses weren't exact, side effects were common, and occasionally someone mistook the blessed poppy tincture for the experimental wormwood laxative. The line between help and hazard was thin, and occasionally someone slept for so long they woke up thinking the harvest was over and the king had died. The monks would debate remedies for poppy overindulgence. Answer: more prayer, and maybe a cold bucket of water. But secretly, everyone agreed it was still better than listening to old widow Godiva's midnight toothache complaints. So yes, monasteries were the medieval pharmacies, full of wisdom, confusion, and just enough poppy milk to keep England's sleepless masses sedated and spiritual. Blessings optional, refills not guaranteed. Don't think poppy milk was just for peasants. Upstairs in the great hall, the nobility are tossing back mugs like it's the world's sleepiest happy hour, because nothing says wealth like being able to nap through the sound of your peasants arguing with a goat at 2 a.m. Let's set the scene. You're reclining on a bench that's almost, but not quite, comfortable, surrounded by tapestries depicting heroic ancestors who definitely never had to share a bedroom with 6 siblings and a drafty wall. Your fireplace roars, mainly for effect, not efficiency, and somewhere, a harried servant is trying to remember if they were supposed to add honey or cinnamon to your lordship's poppy milk, or just quietly swap the cup for weak ale when nobody's looking. For the nobility, sleep is not just a necessity, it's a luxury, a statement, and sometimes an outright competition. Who can get the most uninterrupted hours? Who can drift off during a particularly tedious court bard's poem without snoring or drooling in public? The answer is almost always whoever had the best batch of poppy milk delivered by the most discreet kitchen boy. The manor house runs on a strict schedule. Wake up late, wander around in expensive pajamas, which, in this case, means an embroidered tunic and some very silly slippers, and then begin complaining about the weather, taxes, or the neighbour's sheep. By mid-afternoon, someone inevitably calls for a restorative. This is code for "I'm bored. Bring me the good stuff." Silver goblets are filled, a toast is made, and before you know it, half the household staff is tiptoeing around their noble masters, trying not to wake anyone who's finally managed to sleep through the Lord's enthusiastic attempts at the lute. It's not just about escaping noise either. Nobles face a different kind of stress: intrigue, inheritance drama, and the ever-present threat of being poisoned by a distant cousin who resents your right to the larger portion of the family pig. Everyone needs an edge, and if that edge comes in the form of a potent, opiate-infused nightcap, so be it. No noble in their right mind wants to toss and turn over estate finances or the looming possibility of being called to war in France. They want to drift off, face pressed into a goose-down pillow, dreaming of better banquets. Of course, nothing in noble life happens without a flourish of excess. Poppy milk isn't served in a chipped bowl by the fire. Oh no. The kitchen staff prepare it in ornate pots, with a choice of sweeteners. Imported sugar for those who like to show off, honey for the traditionalists, and, for the especially adventurous, a dash of brandy or a sprinkle of ground nutmeg, which costs more than your average peasant earns in a year. Serving poppy milk becomes a nightly ritual. Elaborate, whispered, and just a little bit illicit. After all, nobody wants to be accused of sleeping through their duties, at least not officially. Naturally, there are side effects. Sometimes, Lady Matilda snoozes right through a crucial family council, only to wake up at dinner and declare that she's had a vision of St. Margaret. Really just the side effects of one too many mugs and a fainting couch that's a little too comfortable. Sometimes, the young lord spends the entire night sleep-talking about falconry, alarming both the guests and the actual falcons. Every noble house has a story about the time the master of the manor was overserved and accidentally napped through a tax assessment, a cousin's wedding, or, in one legendary case, a minor peasant revolt. Still, for all the risks, poppy milk remains the manor's secret weapon against sleeplessness, anxiety, and the relentless noise of lower-class ambition. Nobles might pretend their wealth insulates them from the world's problems, but at the end of the day, they want exactly what the peasants want: a little peace, a little quiet, and a really, really good nap. Sleep, after all, is the ultimate status symbol, and nothing says I've made it like being able to snooze through both your problems and your obligations, all while the world keeps spinning just outside your shuttered window. Parenting in medieval England was less about gentle sleep training and more about, let's hope this works. Got a screaming baby? Give it a tiny bit of poppy milk and watch as your infant drifts off to medieval dreamland, where teething and plague both disappear for a few blissful hours. Now, let's be clear. There was no parenting manual. There was no what to expect when you're expecting a famine, no pediatrician with a stethoscope, and definitely no soothing playlist called Lullabies for Medieval Infants Volume 1. There was you, a screaming child, a hut that echoed every wail straight to the neighbor's hut, and a deep, persistent need to get at least 3 hours of sleep before sunrise. You've tried everything: rocking, singing, bribing the local wise woman for a sprig of lavender or a whispered prayer. Nothing works. The baby is still red-faced, wailing like it's auditioning for a one-child opera, and the neighbors are starting to talk, loudly, through the thatch. At this point, even the livestock are giving you looks that say, "Please, for the love of Saint Agnes, make it stop." You'd do anything for silence, and so, like countless exhausted parents before you, you turn to the village's not-so-secret weapon: poppy milk. Dosing a medieval baby is more art than science. The accepted wisdom is just enough to help them sleep, not enough to make them miss their first steps. The recipe varies wildly: a drop on the tongue, a spoon in the porridge, or, for the really desperate, a mug watered down until it's mostly just hope and milk. Grandmothers everywhere swear by their own personal ratios. Some insist a touch of honey helps, others add mint for the nerves, and a few bold souls sneak in a thimbleful of ale for flavor. It's the kind of ad hoc medicine that would make modern doctors faint. The results, though, are hard to argue with. Within minutes, your little one is out cold, snoring gently while the world outside continues its medieval madness. For the first time in days, the entire family can close their eyes and pretend that bedtime is a real concept, not just a distant dream. There's a collective sigh of relief. Siblings can stop fighting. The goat can go back to chewing on someone else's shoe. And you can enjoy the rare luxury of sitting by the hearth in relative peace. But, as with all miracle cures, there are trade-offs. The line between soothing sleep and sleep so deep you worry you've invented time travel is thin. Sometimes the baby sleeps through a rooster's crow, a thunderstorm, and 3 separate calls to prayer. Occasionally there are strange dreams, sleepwalking, giggles at odd hours, or the occasional midnight babble about the cheese ghost. There's also the persistent rumor that overuse might bring the attention of the parish priest, who frowns on anything that looks too much like unnatural silence. More than one parent has been gently reminded that children are a gift from God, not an excuse for recreational herbalism. Meanwhile, the local herbalist has business booming. Every village has at least one. A wily woman with a garden full of questionable plants, a head full of recipes, and a reputation for solving every problem from insomnia to love, sickness. She's the unofficial consultant on dosing, always ready to share advice, often in exchange for eggs, firewood, or a promise to stop letting your ducks eat her turnips. Her advice is simple: don't overdo it. Let the child sleep, but don't let them sleep through Lent. Poppy milk isn't just for infants either. Toddlers with night terrors, children scared of storms, and even adults too wound up from a day in the fields have all benefited from a carefully measured dose. In a world with no real relief from pain, fear, or exhaustion, the promise of a quiet night is worth its weight in gold, or at least in chickens. So yes, medieval parenting was chaotic, noisy, and almost always sleep-deprived. But for a few hours each night, poppy milk was the great equalizer, a bedtime story in a mug, a lullaby in liquid form, and the closest thing to peace a medieval family was ever going to find. Sleep tight. Don't let the cheese ghosts bite. The church, ever vigilant against fun, has opinions. Is poppy milk a sin? A miracle? Or just a really good way to keep parishioners from snoring through Mass? One thing's certain: confession lines are longer than usual, and most of the penance involves staying awake. In the 14th century, if you wanted to know what was allowed, what was forbidden, or just what you should be worrying about on any given day, you went straight to the church. Spiritual authority loomed over everything from breakfast to bedtime, and the clergy took their job as moral referees very seriously, especially when it came to anything that looked suspiciously pleasant or suspiciously effective. And poppy milk, with its mysterious powers to soothe, sedate, and silence even the most unruly congregation, quickly became a hot topic. It started quietly enough. Monks and nuns had already been growing poppies for medicinal use, and everyone knew the local priest's headache remedy came with a suspiciously heavy aftertaste. But as poppy milk began to spread from monastery pharmacies to peasant cottages and even noble manors, church authorities started to pay attention. Sermons began to feature not-so-subtle warnings. Beware the flower that lulls you into sloth. Only the Lord should bring rest to the weary, not the juice of the field. For every villager who claimed poppy milk was God's gift to sleepless souls, there was a priest with a finger raised, reminding everyone that unnatural rest might be a fast track to hell, or at least a stern talking to at confession. For parish priests, poppy milk posed a delicate challenge. On the one hand, it was undeniably effective. Parishioners slept through thunderstorms, nightmares, and, unfortunately, sometimes the entire Sunday sermon. But on the other hand, the church wasn't about to let an unregulated beverage upstage centuries of carefully curated penance and prayer. There was a creeping worry that, if left unchecked, poppy milk might encourage idleness. The medieval world ran on the virtue of suffering. You woke, you worked, you worried, and you did it all for the glory of God. And maybe a shot at heaven, assuming the bishop remembered your name. Anything that made life a little too easy, or sleep a little too deep, had to be eyed with suspicion. So, the church hedged its bets. Official doctrine was muddy at best. Local priests issued contradictory advice. Take a little for pain, but not for pleasure. Sleep, but only if you pray first. Use poppy milk in moderation, lest your dreams become the devil's playground. In confessionals across England, poppy milk made regular appearances. Forgive me, Father, for I have slept through vespers. Bless me, Father, I have indulged in the flower's relief. Priests, in turn, assigned creative penance. Say 3 Hail Marys and spend the next night cold turkey. More than one parishioner spent a week awake and jittery, reflecting on the dangers of easy sleep and the importance of spiritual vigilance. Meanwhile, rumors swirled that some higher-ups in the church secretly approved. After all, a well-rested flock was less likely to riot, confess weird dreams about the bishop, or collapse in the middle of a 6-hour mass. Some abbots were even said to dose particularly troublesome monks before important feast days, ensuring they wouldn't snore, fight, or embarrass the monastery in front of visiting nobles. The line between sin and blessed relief was always blurry. And then there were the miracle stories. Here and there, a saintly vision or two popped up. An old widow who claimed poppy milk gave her a glimpse of the Virgin. A child who dreamed of angels after a generous bedtime dose. These tales circulated, gathering embellishments, and for a while, it almost seemed like poppy milk might get the official thumbs up. But just as quickly, a rival rumor would surface. Did you hear about Farmer John? Slept so long he missed Easter. Now he's in the stocks, wide awake and repenting. Ultimately, the church's approach was classic medieval compromise. Allow just enough poppy milk for health and sanity, but never, ever enough to threaten the holy grind of daily life. The official line was always caution, always moderation, and always, just to be safe, a few extra prayers, because you never really knew what might be hiding in your dreams. So if you were a medieval soul looking for a little peace at night, you'd better pray before you sip, confess after you wake, and hope that when the local priest comes knocking, he's just in need of a little poppy milk himself. Herbalists had a field day. Try a dash of lavender, they said. Or maybe don't mainline poppy milk. But nothing else works as well. Soon, entire villages are caught in a wellness arms race, comparing mug sizes like it's an ancient sleepover. Forget everything you know about modern health trends. Medieval England's approach to wellness makes Instagram life coaches look downright restrained. Here, wellness means a sticky pot of mysterious herbs simmering by the hearth, a suspiciously chunky broth that cures what ails you, and a thriving marketplace of advice from anyone who's ever sniffed a wildflower or survived a fever. Welcome to the original self-care movement, starring the local wise woman, the slightly scary man who claims to be a root doctor, and your neighbor's aunt who puts sage in everything, including her shoes. Every ailment has a cure, at least according to someone. Got headaches? Try chewing willow bark. Stomach trouble? Chamomile and mint, preferably brewed so strong your eyebrows curl. Can't sleep? Well, my cousin swears by sleeping with a bag of hops under his pillow, and he only fell off the roof once. The remedies never end, and the faith in them is ironclad, regardless of whether they work or just smell funny. Of course, poppy milk is the heavyweight champion of the sleep aid circuit. Herbalists roll their eyes, but even they have to admit, nothing else knocks you out quite like it. Still, competition is fierce. Villages one-up each other in their pursuit of natural sleep. Lavender sachets hung from bedposts, valerian root tea brewed strong enough to melt a wooden spoon, and ritual baths with rose petals, if you're lucky enough to have the water or don't mind sharing the tub with last season's tadpoles. And then there's the ever-present danger of going too far. Everyone has a story about that one neighbor who decided to mix every calming herb in their garden and ended up sleepwalking to the next village, or the poor soul who tried a nettle and garlic poultice, only to spend the night scratching and smelling like a haunted sausage. Home remedies are less about results and more about stories to be retold for years to come, preferably with a strong drink and a good laugh. The wellness trend isn't just about plants, either. Sleep hacks abound, many of them dubious at best. Some swear by walking counterclockwise around your cottage 3 times before bed. Others insist on reciting a specific rhyme to keep nightmares away. Bonus points if you can remember the whole thing without yawning. If you're really desperate, You might even try placing a horseshoe under your pillow, because in medieval logic, anything heavy enough to give you a concussion probably works as a dream catcher. Of course, the village herbalist is always at the center of the action. She's the go-to for every sleep problem, pain, or bout of the vapors. Her shelves are lined with jars filled with dried flowers, mysterious roots, and powders that look suspiciously like crushed biscuits. She doles out advice with a sly grin and a warning not to overdo it with the poppy, or you'll miss Christmas again. Everyone claims to have their own secret remedy, but somehow everyone also ends up at her door after 3 nights of tossing, turning, and praying for deliverance from their own thoughts. The real fun begins at the communal sleepover, because let's be honest, a medieval house at night is basically a group nap with extra snoring. Before bedtime, everyone compares their mugs. I use lavender with my milk. Mine's got 4 kinds of flour in it. My cousin adds a splash of mead. But don't tell the priest. It's an arms race of wellness. And no one wants to be the first to nod off, unless the poppy milk kicks in which case, good luck staying awake through the bedtime story. So, as you listen to a house full of snoring relatives and neighbors, and your eyelids droop from a cocktail of herbs and history, take comfort in this. Wellness fads are eternal. Sleep is always just out of reach. And no matter how many hacks you try, you'll never quite beat a good cup of medieval poppy milk. May your dreams be deep, your herbs be harmless, and your bedtime mug be only as strong as you dare. Where there's demand, there's supply. Enter the poppy milk dealers, the shadiest people at the village market, always looking over their shoulders and whispering, "You want the good stuff or the strong stuff?" No one asks where the poppies come from. No one wants to know. It turns out, even in a world with no electricity, no indoor plumbing, and more chickens than people, the entrepreneurial spirit thrives, especially when there's a buck or a goose to be made. The official story is that poppy milk is a simple home remedy, doled out by kindly monks and wise grandmothers. The real story? The poppy milk economy is a thriving cottage industry of side-eye, secrecy, and barter, so complicated you'd need 3 accountants and a priest to unravel it. Let's set the scene. It's market day in a muddy village square. Stalls are piled high with cabbages, suspiciously lean sausages, and a variety of objects labeled possibly edible. In one shadowy corner stands a figure in a patched cloak, a little too interested in who's approaching and a little too nervous about the local reeve. That's your poppy milk dealer. She, or he, depending on the day's disguise, operates with all the discretion of a medieval spy. Her basket looks like it's filled with eggs, but underneath the hay is a stash of poppy heads, some dried, some fresh, all of them carefully wrapped and ready for business. Deals are quick and quiet. How much for the strong batch? Will this get my baby to sleep, or just make my husband forget about the rent? Poppy milk dealers speak their own language. Moon's full, take a half dose, or harvest coming, stock up now, the Lord's getting nosy. Payment comes in all forms. A dozen eggs, a bolt of rough wool, an IOU carved on a piece of bark. Currency is whatever you can trade without drawing attention, because no one wants to be the villager who gets caught with illegal flowers when the manor steward is feeling bored. Black market poppy milk isn't just about sidestepping taxes or avoiding the church's disapproving glare. It's about survival. After all, when the official poppy crop is spoken for by the monastery and the Lord's garden is off limits, where else are you going to get a good night's sleep? Some dealers cultivate their own secret gardens, hidden between rows of cabbages or deep in the woods, guarded by rumors of curses, and, occasionally, very territorial ducks. Others liberate their product from less than attentive noble estates, risking more than just a scolding if they're caught. Naturally, quality control is a problem. Everyone claims their batch is the real thing, but results vary wildly. There's the poppy milk that's so strong you wake up 3 days later with a beard you didn't have before, and then there's the stuff so weak you start wondering if it's just regular milk with a sprig of thyme and a strong placebo effect. Some dealers cut their product with oat milk, sheep's milk, or, if times are hard, whatever liquid happened to be handy. Buyer, beware. The village rumour mill is always churning. Did you hear about the miller's wife? 2 mugs, and she snored through the last sheep shearing. Old Tom got a bad batch. Now he sees colours every time someone mentions taxes. For the really brave, there's always the annual poppy milk competition. Villagers gather at the edge of the woods, each bringing their strongest brew. Prizes go to whoever naps the longest, snores the loudest, or dreams up the most ridiculous explanation for missing the following day's chores. And let's not forget the risks. The local reeve and the parish priest both frown on unsanctioned commerce, especially when it involves something as suspicious as the sleepy flowers. Periodically, a crackdown is announced. Confiscated poppy heads burned in the village square, stern lectures delivered, and everyone pretending to forget the location of the nearest secret garden. 2 days later, business resumes as usual, just with more creative hiding places and a new set of code words. So next time you imagine medieval life as all hard work and holy suffering, remember, there's always a shadow economy. Always someone willing to barter for blissful oblivion. Poppy milk isn't just a sleep aid, it's the heart of an underground trade, where the real currency is a good night's rest, and the price, occasionally, is a little more excitement than you bargained for. The downside of a good night's sleep? Waking up with a head full of cotton, a tongue like a sheep's blanket, and the faint suspicion you promised your neighbor your only chicken in exchange for just one more cup, the poppy milk hangover. Medieval, but relatable. Let's face it, poppy milk works a little too well. Last night, you were floating, peaceful and drool-stained, blissfully unaware of the goat trying to eat your boots. Now, the sun is much too bright. The rooster is approximately 4 times louder than usual, and you're not entirely sure what day it is. You try to stretch, but your limbs feel like someone replaced your bones with boiled turnips. Your mouth is dry, your head is pounding, and there's a suspicious note in your own handwriting promising eternal friendship and free eggs to old Nan, who's already knocking on your door for payment. The hazards don't stop with the hangover. The whole village is a little off this morning. You're not the only one shuffling around, red-eyed and groggy. Across the street, the blacksmith is slumped over his anvil, hammer in hand, staring blankly at a horseshoe he can't remember forging. The children, usually noisy as crows at dawn, are oddly silent, except for the one kid who appears to have sleepwalked into the duck pond and is now soggily questioning the nature of reality. Breakfast is a struggle. Last night's leftover pottage tastes like defeat and regret. The bread is even harder than usual, which you didn't think was possible. No one's quite sure who's supposed to feed the animals, and everyone's pretending not to hear the piglet squealing for its morning snack. The mood is quietly conspiratorial. Everyone knows what happened, but no one wants to be the first to admit it. Rough night? I think so. Strong batch? I blame the herbalist. Then come the stories. You should have seen yourself. You tried to argue philosophy with a cabbage. That wasn't me. That was my brother. No, your brother was the one who recited poetry to the dog. Tales of sleep-drunk antics become a new village folklore, shared over mugs of weak ale and watery porridge. It's all fun and games until someone remembers the part where they swore to help patch a roof or donate next week's eggs. Poppy milk doesn't just put you to sleep, it makes you dangerously generous, surprisingly philosophical. and occasionally convinced you're a chicken. Of course, the risks go beyond embarrassment and missing chores. The morning after poppy milk, reflexes are slow, tempers short, and mistakes are made. Fires are left untended, tools go missing, and more than one unlucky villager discovers they've overslept through mass and must now brave the disappointed glare of the parish priest. The truly unlucky will wake up to find that their restful night came at the cost of their only pair of shoes, now on loan to a neighbor who just needed them for a minute. No one remembers the details, no one ever does, and yet there's a quiet camaraderie in this collective grogginess. Everyone's suffering together, united by the universal truth that sleep, when it finally arrives, can be a double-edged sword. By midday, most of the symptoms have worn off. If not, there's always the folk remedy of a cold splash of water to the face, a strong cup of nettle tea, or just stubbornly ignoring reality until your head clears. But the warnings are always there. Be careful with that stuff, says the herbalist, passing out cups with a knowing look. Take less next time, advises the old-timer, who's been making bad decisions since Edward III. You nod, you promise moderation, and you definitely, absolutely intend to resist next time, at least until the next sleepless night rolls around. Because that's the thing about poppy milk hangovers. They're a hazard, sure, but they're also the price you pay for a few hours of peace in a world that almost never lets you rest. So you laugh, you nurse your aches, and you try to remember where you left your dignity. And maybe your chicken. For every well-meaning apothecary, there's a guy in a suspicious cloak selling extra pure poppy milk that's 90% pond water. Welcome to medieval England's original wellness scam. It's not snake oil, but it might contain actual snake. It turns out, wherever there's a popular remedy, there's always someone ready to cut it, fake it, or stretch it so far that even the village goat starts looking suspicious. Medieval England is no exception. Poppy milk may have started as a sincere attempt to help the sleep-deprived, but pretty soon, a cottage industry of hucksters, scammers, and accidental poisoners springs up, eager to cash in on the nation's collective exhaustion. It all starts innocently enough. The village apothecary is overworked, the herbalist is swamped, and demand for genuine, reliable poppy milk is at an all-time high. That's when the quacks arrive, men and women with just enough knowledge of herbs to be dangerous, and just enough confidence to talk a donkey into buying a second pair of shoes. They show up at the market, cloaked and mysterious, hawking vials of miracle sleep solution with names like Dreamer's Draught or St. Benedict's Nightcap. Each bottle looks promising, but the contents are anyone's guess. Watered-down poppy milk, barley mash, leftover broth, or, if you're truly unlucky, a surprise blend of pond water and yesterday's leech bath. The marketing is genius. Extra strong, they boast. Guaranteed to make you sleep like a lord. No nightmares, no headaches, and absolutely no risk of waking up married to the blacksmith's sister. The pitch is so convincing that you almost forget you saw this same guy last week selling magic stones that repel witches, or the week before that offering invisible armor against taxes. There's always a crowd, drawn by the hope of easy sleep or, failing that, the promise of a good story to tell when the concoction inevitably fails. Word spreads fast. Some villagers swear by their new sleep elixir, never mind that it tastes suspiciously like swamp and works only on Tuesdays. Others, less lucky, spend the night wide awake, plotting revenge on the quack who tricked them out of 3 eggs and a loaf of bread. The worst cases are the counterfeiters who go a step too far, diluting their wares with anything that looks white and milky, from oat gruel to sheep's whey. One batch famously included turnip juice and gave the entire village vivid dreams of flying root vegetables for a week. For the desperate, The lure of a cheap cure is hard to resist. Apothecaries can only shake their heads and hand out real poppy milk, warning customers to check the smell, the taste, and if it fizzes, run. The wise woman next door tells horror stories about old Mr. Bibby, who bought a counterfeit batch and ended up sleep-talking in Latin for 3 days. The local priest, meanwhile, prays for the soul of anyone willing to buy miracle sleep from a stranger who refuses to take off their hood. Not all the quacks are malicious. Some are just wildly optimistic about their own recipes. There's the well-meaning but clueless young man who tries to brew his own version using dandelion and, for reasons no one understands, a pinch of pig hair. There's the grandmother who claims she can stretch one poppy head to serve the whole village, but the only thing stretched is everyone's patience. Counterfeit poppy milk doesn't just threaten your rest, it's a social hazard. If you get caught buying from the wrong dealer, you might be the punchline at the tavern for weeks. Tried the new poppy milk, did you? Heard you spent the night playing chess with a sheep. And yet, despite all the scams, the demand never drops. People crave sleep, hope, and the chance to try the next big thing, even if it sometimes means waking up with more questions than answers. So next time you're offered a secret sleep remedy by someone who smells like frogs and optimism, remember, in medieval England, the real miracle is finding a cup that actually works, and maybe doesn't come with a free pet leech. When your feudal overlord spends more time napping than oppressing, things get weird. Nobles addicted to poppy milk occasionally forget to collect taxes, invade France, or remember which century it is. Sometimes this is a good thing. It all starts with good intentions. Lords, like everyone else, crave a break from the relentless pressure of managing a drafty manor house, orchestrating petty vendettas, and inventing new taxes for things like excessively loud cows and suspiciously happy peasants. So when poppy milk starts making the rounds as a miracle sleep aid, the nobility leap on the trend with all the enthusiasm of people who've never had to set their own alarm clock. At first, it's subtle. A mug after dinner, a sip before bedtime. Purely medicinal, of course, for stress. But very quickly, the line between just enough to take the edge off and Sir Geoffrey has been asleep since Lent gets blurry. The lady of the manor develops a fondness for her special brew, while the young lordling is found face down in a featherbed at noon, mumbling about dragonflies and forgetting all about his fencing lessons. Soon, poppy milk addiction becomes the worst-kept secret in the Great Hall. The steward is constantly adjusting the household schedule around everyone's restorative naps, and the cooks are issued strict orders. Never run out of milk, honey, or poppy heads, or risk an insurrection far more dangerous than a bread riot. You know things have gone sideways when the Lord's falconer is tasked not with catching birds, but with finding a more reliable supplier of the good stuff. The effects ripple outwards. Whole villages notice their lords are suddenly much less demanding. Tax day comes and goes, with barely a scolding. "Sorry," the Baron mutters, yawning. "I'll get you next week." Vassals find themselves temporarily liberated from forced labor, as the only thing being pressed in the manor is the snooze button. Local disputes over sheep, fields, or who gets to use the good bread oven are left unresolved for months, while their supposed rulers gently drool into velvet cushions. Of course, not everyone is happy about the new regime of rest. Ambitious knights complain that their chance to impress has been replaced with pillow tournaments. Distant cousins with eyes on the estate grumble that the family legacy is being jeopardized by too many naps and not enough blood feuds. Even the parish priest begins to worry, especially after the Baron sleeps straight through Sunday Mass and a visiting bishop's tedious sermon. Rumors start to circulate. Is this sloth, sin, or just a really good cup of poppy milk? Still, there are upsides. Neighbouring lords take note and begin spreading rumours. Don't invade the de Neville estate. You'll just wake them up. Petty squabbles and ancient grudges dissolve in a haze of mutual drowsiness. Feasts are shorter, speeches are fewer, and the odds of getting conscripted for a midnight raid drop dramatically. Some villagers argue this is the golden age. Let sleeping lords lie, they say, and maybe we'll all get a little peace. But every high comes with a crash. At some point, the manor's poppy milk stash runs low. The great hall is filled with anxious nobles, trembling on the edge of wakefulness, and trying to remember which shoes go on which feet. The steward is dispatched on a quest for poppy heads, returning in disgrace after getting lost at the crossroads. Lady Matilda attempts to substitute with herbal tea and finds herself wide awake, plotting vengeance on the herbalist who dares suggest valerian. Inevitably, the supply is restored. The lords sink back into their luxurious slumber, and the cycle resumes. The poppy milk age continues. One long, gently snoring interruption in the story of English feudalism. So, if you ever wonder why some century-old family feuds just fizzled out or why that medieval tax record is suspiciously blank, remember, sometimes history pauses not for war, plague, or politics, but for the world's most powerful bedtime beverage, and occasionally that's exactly what everyone needed. Nothing pairs with a catastrophic epidemic quite like a mug of sleep-inducing flower juice. While England wrestles with waves of plague, the poppy milk industry booms. If you can't escape death, at least you can sleep through the symptoms. The Black Death sweeps the countryside, but life goes on. Or, more accurately, nods off. As the world outside grows feverish, England's poppy fields are suddenly more valuable than gold, spices, or even halfway decent bread. Apothecaries can barely keep up. Wise women run out of stock, and every village whispers about which neighbor has a secret stash. Forget the healer or the priest. What people want is a break from reality. A cup of something that dulls the terror, soothes the cough, and lets you drift somewhere far from the sound of bells tolling for yet another unlucky soul. You wake up, check for new lumps or suspicious rashes, and immediately start planning how to get your hands on another mug of poppy milk. There's a resigned camaraderie in the air. Everyone is just a little too tired, a little too anxious, and entirely fed up with listening to Cousin Alfred list the symptoms for the 10th time that week. Even the livestock seem on edge, which, given the circumstances, is understandable. It doesn't take long for the poppy milk market to adapt. The cleverest dealers offer plague-strength brews with extra poppy for those who really need a good night's sleep. Some even claim their recipe keeps the plague away, though the only thing it reliably wards off is awareness of your own misery. Church sermons rail against sinful oblivion, while the local herbalist quietly becomes the most popular person in town. The more daring customers show up in the dead of night, cloaked and coughing, trading chickens and promises for another week's supply. In households across England, poppy milk becomes the new family ritual. No one talks about the future. They just take their mugs and huddle by the fire, eyes heavy, hoping the night passes quietly. For children, it's a rare chance to be spared the fear and confusion swirling outside. For adults, it's an escape, a small mercy in a world that offers precious few. Stories circulate of entire villages where the only sound after dark is snoring. The only dreams worth having are ones with no mention of plague doctors, and the only arguments are about who gets the last cup. Of course, not everyone approves. There's always the neighbor who claims to be vigilant for sin, peering through curtains and reporting poppy milk parties to the reeve. Some priests warn that sleeping too much is itself a sign of doom, as if the only thing worse than the plague is missing matins because you accidentally slept for 2 days, but for most, the risk is worth it. If you can't escape fate, you might as well escape consciousness for a while. The results are predictably chaotic. Villagers wake up at odd hours, confused about whether it's morning, night, or the end of the world. Meals are missed, chores forgotten, and at least one unlucky miller is found napping under his cart with 3 empty mugs and no memory of how he got there. Children invent new games about plague sleep, pretending to be the last awake and claiming prizes for best fake snore. The local lord issues a stern decree: moderation in all things, but is seen hours later dozing in his solar, a telltale cup still warm beside him. Even when the plague ebbs, the habit remains. People have learned that sometimes the best way to deal with disaster is to take a nap and try again tomorrow. Poppy milk never cures the plague, but it does what no other remedy can. It lets you escape, for a while, from the noise and the fear, from the endless bad news and the sleepless nights. So, in a world where disaster never really sleeps, England does what it does best. It finds a way to rest anyway. And if the answer is a mug of suspiciously milky flower juice, well, who are we to argue with survival? Forget masquerades. The hottest social event in 1390 is the poppy milk party. Candles, cloaks, maybe some badly tuned lutes, and a table groaning with mugs of medieval knockout juice. No one remembers the details, and honestly, that's the point. Step into the manor's great hall on a Friday night. The fire roars, tapestries flutter in the draught, and a collection of England's finest, or at least wealthiest, gather for an event that promises less dancing and more drowsing. The invitations are vague. An evening of rest and relaxation, dress for comfort, bring your favorite goblet, and leave your complaints at the door. The hostess winks and mentions the special batch. You know exactly what you're in for. These aren't wild parties exactly. They're more like a luxurious group nap, sandwiched between a half-hearted poetry reading and a very slow game of medieval charades. The poppy milk flows freely, ladled from a massive silver cauldron in the center of the table. It's sweetened with honey, spiced with cinnamon, and, for the especially bold, topped with a swirl of cream from the Lord's own dairy. In the flicker of candlelight, it almost looks magical until the first guest knocks over a mug and promptly dozes off in the rushes. The party begins with the best intentions. Guests arrive in their finest bedrobes, slippers, and fur-lined nightcaps. Someone plays the lute, badly, while the rest compete to tell the sleepiest story, a genre that, by this point, is mostly just recounting what happened last time the bishop visited and fell asleep in the privy. There's always a serving boy trying to sneak sips, only to be caught nodding off in the pantry halfway through the night. The air is thick with laughter, yawns, and the unmistakable scent of flowers, honey, and social permission to relax in public. As the night wears on, the party transitions from lively to horizontal. Some guests remain upright just long enough to gossip about the neighbors, compare who's using the fanciest goblet, or debate the proper ratio of poppy to milk. I prefer 3 heads per mug. 4 is for amateurs. But soon enough, the poppy milk does its work. Bodies slip down from benches onto cushions, then from cushions to carpets, then finally just wherever gravity decides to leave them. It's the only social event where the host expects you to nap and takes it as a compliment when you snore. The aftermath is legendary. The next morning, guests wake up at odd hours, blinking in confusion at half-remembered dreams, sticky mugs, and a friend who's somehow lost their shoes but gained a turkey feather. Someone tries to piece together the night's conversations. Did we really debate sheep breeding for an hour, or did I dream that? While the host gently ushers everyone toward a restorative breakfast of bread, weak ale, and silent understanding. Of course, there are always risks. One unlucky guest inevitably drinks too much and becomes the subject of next month's gossip. Lady Alice slept through the Archbishop's speech and started singing about turnips. The steward has to account for at least 3 lost goblets, a missing tapestry, and a small dog now mysteriously named Poppy. Yet everyone agrees. These parties are the highlight of the social calendar, a way for the rich to show off their access to both luxury and oblivion. Poppy milk parties serve another purpose too. They break down the walls of status and rivalry. For a few hours, everyone is equal. Equally sleepy, equally ridiculous, equally likely to be found drooling in a pile of cloaks. Politics and property disputes dissolve in a haze of collective rest. It's hard to plot against your neighbor when you're using their leg as a pillow. So, while masquerades and feasts might make the history books, it's the poppy milk party that guests actually look forward to. The one event where the highest compliment you can pay your host is waking up on their floor with absolutely no idea how you got there. And really, in a world of chaos and ambition, who could ask for a better night out? What happens when you try to quit? Not much, except you don't sleep, you hallucinate a little, and you start seeing the Virgin Mary in your neighbor's vegetable patch. Poppy milk withdrawal. Not deadly, just deeply annoying. The first day is all bravado. You stand up, mug in hand, and declare to your household, "No more poppy milk for me. I'm turning over a new leaf." Everyone applauds, mainly because they're too groggy to argue, and also because they secretly want more for themselves. You last exactly until nightfall. By the time the sun sets and the goats are snoring, you're staring at the ceiling, wide-eyed and rethinking your life choices. The straw pokes, the wind howls, and every mouse that scurries across the floor sounds like it's wearing clogs. Night 1. You toss, you turn, you count sheep, chickens, and the many ways you wish you'd just had a small mug just to take the edge off. Sleep doesn't come. Instead, your brain cycles through every embarrassing thing you've ever said to a neighbor, every unfinished chore, and a running commentary on whether that shadow in the corner is just your coat or something much weirder. By 3 a.m., you're composing epic poems in your head and questioning whether the rooster always looked that judgmental. By the second day, reality gets creative. The local priest's sermon sounds suspiciously like a bedtime story, and you start to envy anyone who can doze off, even if it's just the family dog. You can't remember the last time you slept so badly, except you can, and it was before you discovered the wonders of poppy milk. Every well-meaning neighbor offers advice. "Try lavender," says the wise woman. "Drink more ale," suggests the blacksmith. "Just have a nap and pretend you quit," recommends your best friend. You try them all. Nothing works. The third night is the worst. You're seeing shapes in the smoke, hearing the soft call of the poppy patch in your dreams, and, yes, having minor visions in the vegetable garden. You swear you saw a holy figure in the carrots, and now you're not sure if it's a sign or just your body begging for sleep. Your family is sympathetic for the first day or two. By day 4, they're quietly voting to start spiking your evening porridge again. The entire household is tired of your late-night pacing and philosophical rants about the meaning of hay. Withdrawal from poppy milk isn't dangerous, but it's not pretty. Your mood turns prickly, your patience shrinks, and your tolerance for other people's noise is non-existent. Even the dog seems louder. You long for the sweet oblivion of a poppy milk nap, but pride keeps you going, at least until someone waves a fresh mug under your nose and you crumble like old bread. The relapse is both shameful and glorious. You promise yourself, just this once, for a special occasion, but everyone knows how that goes. By now, the cycle is familiar. A few nights of blissful sleep, followed by bold promises, sleepless regrets, and inevitable surrender. The local herbalist pretends to disapprove, but keeps the recipe handy. "Some people just aren't meant to quit," she says, pouring you a mug and reminding you that moderation is the real challenge. The neighbors nod in agreement. After all, they tried quitting last year and ended up sleepwalking into the neighbor's pigsty. There's a quiet camaraderie among poppy milk quitters. You exchange stories, share remedies, and congratulate each other on making it to at least one bedtime without relapsing. But in a world of hard work, noisy huts, and endless worry, it's easy to justify one more cup, maybe two. In the end, poppy milk addiction is a gentle sort of trap. You're not ruining your life, just making it a little softer around the edges. And, occasionally, a little more surreal. You promise yourself you'll cut back maybe tomorrow after one more decent night's sleep, when even the monks say, "You've had enough. It's time to try alternatives." Leech therapy, cold water baths, and that one old lady who claims eating raw turnip cures everything. Spoiler, it doesn't. Let's say you've done it. You've finally crossed the invisible line between blissfully drowsy and the neighbors are drawing straws to see who gets to wake you up. Maybe you polished off one mug too many at the last poppy milk party. Or maybe you just really wanted to sleep through your chores. Relatable. Either way, you've earned yourself a medieval intervention. First on the scene is always the village wise woman. She has a cure for everything. Insomnia, toothache, heartbreak, excessive napping, for poppy milk overindulgence. Her first line of defense is almost always something foul and herbal. Chew this root, drink this bitter tea, and if all else fails, sniff this pouch of dried marjoram until you sneeze yourself awake. She swears by a daily regimen of movement, prayer, and plenty of cold water. You don't argue, mainly because you're still too groggy to form sentences. Next up is the monk, who takes his duties very seriously. His advice? Repent and abstain, which is less helpful when you're still drooling on your own sleeve. For the truly unrepentant, the monastery offers a special restorative regimen of fasting no fun, extra chores, even less fun, and long, cold walks around the herb garden. If you're lucky, the abbot prescribes a course of spiritual readings, preferably in Latin, which guarantees you'll stay awake, out of sheer confusion. Then there's the medieval answer to detox. Leech therapy. The logic goes something like, if you have too much of anything in your system, just let it out. Enter the leech, a small, slimy wake-up call applied to your arm, neck, or, for the truly unlucky, your inner thigh. Nothing sobers you up like losing a little blood to a creature that looks like it wants to steal your secrets. Even the bravest poppy milk enthusiasts think twice before signing up for a session with Brother Oswald and his pet jar of leeches. If you manage to avoid the leech jar, you'll almost certainly get dunked in the nearest river. Cold water baths are the medieval version of shock therapy. Someone drags you down to the stream, counts to 3, and pushes. It's unpleasant, invigorating, and only occasionally leads to pneumonia. On the plus side, you're guaranteed to be wide awake for at least 5 minutes, until your teeth stop chattering and you remember you left your shoes upstream. But the real experts in overindulgence are your fellow villagers. Everyone has a story, and everyone has a remedy. There's the old man who claims a brisk walk at sunrise will cure any stupor. Never mind that he's the only one awake at that hour. The local blacksmith insists on raw eggs mixed with ale, which is objectively terrible. And of course there's old Maud, who has unwavering faith in the humble raw turnip. She hands one to everyone who complains, swears it can cure headaches, heartache, and too much sleep, and then glares at you until you take a bite. Spoiler, again, it's just crunchy disappointment. Sometimes, overindulgence becomes a group project. After a particularly wild night, half the village lines up outside the wise woman's hut, clutching their heads and promising to never, ever drink that much again. The remedy: strong-smelling vinegar, a spoonful of honey, and a very loud lecture about moderation in all things. By midday, most of you are functional, if a little sheepish and suspiciously sticky. Of course, none of these methods actually cure you. The only real remedy is time. Time to sleep it off, time to recover, and time to forget the embarrassing things you said to the parish priest while under the influence. But in a world where options are limited, you try everything once, maybe twice. And, despite your best intentions, you know deep down you'll be back at the poppy milk before the week is out. Just, hopefully, with a little more restraint and a lot fewer leeches. Who needs an alarm clock when the entire village overslept? Medieval England's productivity hit historic lows. The only thing getting harvested on time is a crop of very drowsy farmers. If you think modern quiet quitting is a problem, try living in a world where the chief economic engine is nap-related inertia. You wake before sunrise, at least, you're supposed to. But instead of the cheerful chorus of roosters, what you get is the muffled sound of snoring through wattle and daub walls. The local bell ringer is late, the smithy's fire hasn't been lit, and the baker's first loaf comes out at noon, still half asleep and missing half its flour. The cause? Last night's village-wide poppy milk binge. The effects ripple through every layer of society. In the fields, peasants shuffle through the morning mist, hose in hand, eyes half closed. The conversations are slow, the jokes even slower. What's the point of weeding today? Someone yawns. We can just nap until the weeds get tired and leave. No one laughs, mainly because no one has the energy. Wheat waves gently in the breeze, awaiting harvest by a labor force that's more interested in finding a shady spot and catching up on their collective sleep deficit. Task lists stretch out like the road to Canterbury. The well needs repairing, the fences need mending, and technically, someone should be keeping an eye on the children who, thanks to a recent surge in experimental dosages, are fast asleep under the cabbage patch. Faces smeared with last night's pottage. You know it's bad when the village geese seem more motivated than their human caretakers. Even the local lord rides by, surveying his sluggish workforce, and, too sleepy to bother shouting, just shrugs and heads home for his mid-morning nap. Poppy milk doesn't just slow down the peasants. In the towns, shopkeepers open late, guild meetings start even later, and the only industry booming is the business of miracle remedies for excessive drowsiness, mostly just vinegar and shouting. Apprentices try to nap standing up, merchants doze over their ledgers, and the town crier is forced to bang his bell twice as loud just to wake up his own audience. Deadlines come and go like passing clouds. Everyone has an excuse. And every excuse is a variation on, "Sorry, I overslept." You'd think someone would learn from all this. Instead, it becomes a kind of arms race. Who can function best on the least sleep? Who can brew the just strong enough batch? And who can wake up first without the help of a bucket of icy water? Medieval productivity advice is mostly folklore. Rub garlic on your feet, tie a red ribbon around your finger, or, if you're desperate, ask the parish priest for a penance that involves keeping your eyes open during Mass. None of it works for long. The wise woman and the apothecary try to warn people. Pace yourself, they say. You can't plough a field if you're asleep. But no one listens. Why would you, when the next mug promises another night of blissful, uninterrupted rest? A luxury in a world where tomorrow is always uncertain. And the day after that is likely to be exactly the same. Still, the poppy milk revolution has its defenders. So what if we're late? Argues old Tom, the unofficial philosopher of the hayloft. Better to be well rested and poor than tired, and slightly less poor. Some argue that a little less work means a little more dreaming, a little more time to tell stories, sing songs, and invent new ways to justify not showing up for sheep shearing. The village priest tries to spark a revival of industriousness, but ends up napping through his own sermon, so the fields stay weedy. the chores stay undone, and the chronicles record one of the slowest, sleepiest centuries on record. If history remembers anything about this era, it will be that medieval England proved once and for all: you can't run a kingdom on empty, but you also can't run it when everyone is fast asleep. When the king realizes half his workforce is gently nodding off at midday, panic ensues. New laws are passed. Enforcement is non-existent, mostly because the sheriffs keep falling asleep on the job. It all starts in London, where the palace accountants notice a suspicious drop in tax revenue. Grain shipments are late, the wool trade is at a standstill, and word spreads that even the royal falcons are more interested in napping than hunting. Reports filter in from every shire. Harvest incomplete. Millers asleep at the grindstone. Bakers missing, possibly under a large pile of bread dough. The king, unable to get through a single meeting without his courtiers yawning, declares the situation an emergency. England is officially too sleepy to function. The council convenes. Scribes draft urgent proclamations. The brewing, distribution, and excessive enjoyment of poppy milk is hereby prohibited without proper authorization from someone who is, at this moment, wide awake. The edicts are read in town squares, nailed to church doors, and immediately ignored by everyone who's currently fighting the urge to nap in a haystack. To enforce the new rules, a special squad of poppy milk inspectors is appointed. Their mission? Raid suspected dens of drowsiness, confiscate illicit mugs, and ensure the kingdom's productivity returns to acceptable medieval standards, which are still extremely low, but at least involve being conscious during daylight hours. Unfortunately, the inspectors soon fall victim to the very substance they're supposed to police. The lead sheriff famously dozes off mid-investigation, head resting on a barrel marked "Absolutely not poppy milk." When he's finally roused, he can't remember if he was meant to arrest the herbalist or buy a second mug for himself. The church, ever eager to lend a moral hand, joins the campaign with thundering sermons. Awake, O England! Flee the flower that seduces the soul and saps the spirit. Parish priests are urged to sniff out poppy drinkers in the congregation, though most of them are too busy daydreaming about an afternoon nap. Local reeves try shaming tactics, publicly listing the most notorious nappers. The result? Quiet pride among the sleepy elite and fierce underground competitions for the title of most creative excuse for falling asleep during matins. As always, where there are rules, there are workarounds. Poppy milk drinkers become increasingly sneaky, inventing elaborate hiding places for their stash. Mugs are disguised as soup vessels, and the telltale scent of poppy is masked with extra onions or, in desperate cases, a whiff of boiled turnip, guaranteed to put off even the nosiest inspector. Secret codes develop. Fancy a nightcap now means meet me by the old oak tree with 2 mugs and a lookout. Still, the authorities persist. There are poppy milk amnesties. Turn in your mugs and we'll forgive your past napping offences. And public bonfires where confiscated poppy heads are burned. This backfires spectacularly as the smoke drifts over the village and suddenly half the town is sprawled on the green, snoring in unison. In the end, the laws do what most medieval laws do. They exist on parchment, quoted by officials and ignored by everyone else. Even the king, after a particularly long, sleepless council session, is caught with a cup of suspiciously milky herbal tonic. The rumours are swift. His Majesty too, eh? And soon even the palace guards are taking turns napping at their posts. Strictly off the record, of course. So, the Great Poppy Panic settles into a gentle, communal truce. The laws stay on the books, the inspectors nap on the job, and England quietly accepts that, sometimes, it's better to have a drowsy, peaceful kingdom than a cranky, insomniac one. After all, in a world full of real danger, plague, famine, French invasions, a little poppy milk is probably the least of your worries. And if it keeps the sheriffs from remembering to collect fines, maybe that's not such a bad thing after all. Not every night ended with a mug of poppy milk. Sometimes there were lullabies, stories, and the comforting sound of a neighbor gently snoring into the communal straw. For some, poppy milk was the final act in an elaborate medieval bedtime routine. Let's set the scene. The fire is down to a few glowing embers. Shadows flicker along the lumpy thatch ceiling, and the hut is filled with a soft, sleepy hush. The chores are done. Well, mostly, there's always one more goat to chase, and the family gathers on itchy wool blankets, or, if they're lucky, a half-stuffed mattress. The air is rich with the mingled scents of wood smoke, drying herbs, and whatever passed for dinner. There's comfort in routine, even if comfort itself is in short supply. Medieval bedtime was a group affair. Privacy was a foreign concept, so everyone's winding down together, parents, children, cousins, the occasional chicken, and more than a few lice. The youngest are the first to surrender, lulled by the rhythm of whispered songs. Lullabies in medieval England are less about twinkling stars and more about please, please sleep through the night so I can get 3 hours before dawn. Some are sweet, some practical. Go to sleep or the sheep will eat your shoes. But all are sung in a gentle tone, blending with the creaks and sighs of the house settling in for the night. Stories are next. The best storytellers are the ones who remember not to make the tales too exciting. No dragons or highwaymen right before bedtime, unless you want half the house up with nightmares. Instead, you get tales of clever foxes, lazy giants, saints who could outsnore a bear, and the endlessly entertaining adventures of that time father got lost coming home from the alehouse. If you're lucky, someone has a repertoire of riddles or a good-natured roast of the village reeve. For a moment, everyone forgets the cold and the hunger and loses themselves in a world where the only thing that matters is who can tell the slowest, sleepiest story. Soporifics, herbal or otherwise, complete the picture. On special nights, out come the secret family remedies: lavender stuffed in pillows, hops tied in a handkerchief, a pinch of sage sprinkled near the hearth. Some families share a pot of weak, sweetened milk, and the really lucky, or weary, sneak a drop or two of poppy milk, just to make sure the chickens aren't the only ones sleeping through sunrise. For the rest, it's the lull of routine, the low murmur of prayers, and the reassuring weight of exhaustion after a day well, or at least mostly, spent. For all its discomforts, there's a coziness to the medieval bedtime ritual, a sense of being tucked in by the rhythms of the world. No matter how drafty or unpredictable, you're never alone, which is either a comfort or a curse, depending on how loudly your uncle snores. The noises of the night, dogs barking, wind in the eaves, someone muttering about lost socks, are oddly soothing, a reminder that life is still ticking on, even if the hours are short and the beds are shorter. And of course, there's the final act. The poppy milk. Not for every night, but for the ones when the world feels especially loud, or the worries especially stubborn. The ritual is as calming as the drink itself. The careful measuring, the soft stirring, the shared anticipation as everyone waits for that gentle wave of drowsiness to hit. It's both a treat and a medicine, the ancient precursor to just one more chapter or 5 more minutes on your phone. So, as the last candle gutters out and the room slips into darkness, the day's troubles fade behind the warmth of song, story, and shared sleep. In medieval England, bedtime was less about luxury and more about survival, but sometimes, in the hush between chores and chaos, it almost felt like peace. And, if nothing else, everyone knew that tomorrow's dreams would be a little softer, thanks to the rituals and remedies of a world determined to rest, no matter how noisy, drafty, or crowded it was. Imagine a day when the poppy crop fails. The horror, the chaos, the noise of an entire village, wide awake, realizing just how annoying everyone else's children really are. This is the real medieval crisis. It all starts with an innocent question at the morning market. Has anyone seen any fresh poppy heads? A nervous silence follows. Someone mutters about a bad frost. Someone else blames the goats. And old Nan claims it's divine punishment for skipping last week's mass. Within hours, the news spreads. There's no poppy milk to be found, not a dried pod, not even a stray leaf. You can feel the anxiety rising like steam from the communal pottage. For the first time in years, the entire village is forced to face the night stone-cold sober. The first casualty? Sleep. Children, who normally drift off after dinner with a few drowsy complaints, now bounce around the hut like caffeinated ferrets, staging loud reenactments of the local saints' legends and jousting with fireplace pokers. Babies, who once napped contentedly in the corner, now join in a relentless, ear-piercing chorus. By midnight, every parent in the village is bargaining, bribing, or threatening their offspring with promises of extra bread or tales of haunted turnip patches. None of it works. Adults don't fare much better. You toss and turn, counting the ticks, the cracks in the ceiling, the number of times your neighbor's dog howls at the moon. Without the gentle crutch of poppy milk, every creak in the walls and every gust of wind sounds like the start of a disaster. Arguments erupt over who gets the warmest spot by the fire, whose snoring is worst, and who accidentally elbowed whom during the last attempt at group sleep. The real chaos hits at dawn. Nobody wants to get up, because nobody has actually slept. The entire village is grumpy, glassy-eyed, and oddly motivated to complain about everything. The baker burns the bread, the blacksmith hammers his own thumb, and the priest, who usually prides himself on his patience, is seen muttering distinctly unholy words after a particularly loud yawn interrupts his morning prayers. The wise woman's hut is besieged with desperate pleas for any alternative remedy. She offers valerian root, warm baths, and, as a last resort, a cup of boiled lettuce water. Does it work? You ask. Not really, but it's something to do, she shrugs. Even the animals seem restless. Chickens peck at everything in sight. The pigs refuse to nap, and the cows, who normally seem unfazed by human suffering, moo with the haunted eyes of creatures who know peace has fled. By lunchtime, the fields are half-tended. The sheep have wandered into someone else's vegetable patch, and the only productive people are the children who have begun a game called "Let's see how loud we can be before the adults cry." In the absence of poppy milk, villagers improvise new coping strategies. Some try singing lullabies even after breakfast, hoping sheer repetition will eventually bore anyone, into sleep. Others experiment with communal storytelling, except now the tales are less about clever foxes and more about the glory days when everyone could get a solid night's rest. There's talk of holding a village meeting to discuss emergency bedtime legislation, but no one has the energy to organize it. By sunset, desperation has set in. Someone remembers an old family recipe involving roasted onions and prayer. Another claims that if you hold your nose and jump backwards 3 times, sleep will come. Nothing works. The village is united at last, not in peace or productivity, but in collective insomnia and the deep, universal longing for the return of the poppy harvest. So if you ever wondered what medieval people truly feared, forget bandits and famine. The real nightmare is a night without poppy milk, a sleepless, restless, noisy lesson in just how fragile peace, patience, and bedtime truly are. Some children build up a tolerance, Others, not so much. Tales abound of that one kid who sleepwalks into a duck pond or tries to barter his shoes for another mug. Parenting in the poppy age, more survival than strategy. Medieval childhood has always been a rough and tumble ride, barefoot, unsupervised, and suspiciously sticky. But add poppy milk to the equation, and things start to look less like a family portrait and more like a bedtime-themed fever dream. The trouble begins with the best intentions. A sleepless toddler, a house full of cranky adults, and a mug of something strong enough to pacify a teething baby, a fussy grandparent, and the local pig if you're not careful. At first, it works like a charm. The village's wildest toddlers are finally snoozing through rooster calls, thunderstorms, and even the local tanners singing. Parents, starved for a shred of peace, begin swapping tips. "A spoonful at sunset," says one. "Only on Thursdays," insists another. The wise woman nods sagely and hands out measuring spoons, which no one uses, because eyeballing it is the medieval standard for accuracy. But kids are kids, and nothing stays simple for long. Some tiny insomniacs shrug off their first mug and immediately request seconds. Others are one drop away from face-planting into a hay bale for 18 hours, waking up convinced it's Christmas and demanding presents. Before long, you know exactly which children in the village hold their poppy, and which ones you need to keep away from bodies of water and open windows. There's always that one legendary child, the sleepwalker. Every village has one. He's the hero of at least 6 cautionary tales. Maybe you've heard about the boy who wandered into the neighbor's chicken coop and woke up covered in feathers and righteous confusion, or the girl who tried to trade her shoes for another dose, then spent the rest of the week explaining to her mother why she was barefoot in November. If you're unlucky, the local priest gets involved. It's not natural, he warns. After being woken by a somnambulant child reciting psalms at his door in the moonlight, he suggests prayer. Parents nod, but keep the mug handy, just in case. Tolerance becomes a topic of heated debate at every family gathering. Some families take pride in their strong sleepers. Others worry their children are missing out on valuable life skills like midnight barn raid defense or spontaneous potato theft. A few parents try to go cold turkey, hoping the kids will learn to settle naturally. This lasts until the third night of wall-to-wall wailing, after which the entire family sheepishly returns to the poppy patch, pretending it was a science experiment. Side effects aren't just limited to sleepwalking. Poppified children are prone to epic dreams, some so wild they wake up convinced they're saints, dragons, or the rightful lord of next door's vegetable garden. They recount these dreams in vivid, nonsensical detail over breakfast. "I fought a turnip and won," says one. "The sheep talked to me," claims another. If anything, childhood becomes even more unpredictable. Teachers at the village church school report a notable drop in attention, with one boy snoring so loudly during a reading of Leviticus that even the priest gave up and joined in. Naturally, some parents try alternative methods. Herbal pillows, midnight lullabies, or bribing the kids with extra chores if they just go to bed quietly. Results vary. There are always a few children who refuse poppy milk outright, either on principle or because they don't trust anything their parents describe as yummy. These outliers become the unofficial bedtime resistance, wide awake and plotting, while the rest of the household slumbers in chemically assisted bliss. At the end of the day, medieval parenting is less about perfection and more about survival. Poppy milk is just one tool in the arsenal, a double-edged sword that offers peace but brings chaos, gives rest but spawns stories. In the poppy age, the kids might not always be all right, but at least the adults get a little peace and quiet. For now, minstrels, poets, and traveling jesters quickly catch on. Soon, Every village is awash in poppy milk jokes, catchy songs, and the occasional one-man show called Poppies and Regrets, a tragedy in 3 naps. The news of England's latest bedtime obsession spreads as only a truly irresistible trend can by word of mouth. Wandering loot and occasionally elaborate puppet show. It isn't long before every dirt track and market crossroads is echoing with the clatter of a troop's wagon and the distant sound of someone practicing a punchline about snoring. For the travelling entertainer, poppy milk is comedic gold, a rare chance to poke fun at everyone, from lords with sleep-deprived falcons to peasants who can barely keep their eyes open long enough to watch the show. A typical evening performance in the village green features a mix of sharp-eyed humour and sly social commentary. There are jokes about noble lords who nap through important decrees, only to wake up and declare war on France by mistake. Poets recite verses about the sleepy knight who slept through his quest, while the jester, face painted and hair wild, pantomimes an entire scene of someone trying to milk a poppy plant, getting more juice on their shoes than in their cup. The most beloved acts are the ones that go straight for the universal experience. Waking up confused, not knowing if it's dawn or dusk, or the horror of promising to mend the roof for your neighbour and only remembering after 3 solid mugs of poppy milk. Songs become instant hits, the kind that even the children know by heart. There's the classic, "If you're drowsy and you know it, clap your hands." Though most audiences are too tired to do more than yawn along, no one is safe from the fun. The local priest is ribbed for his miraculous naps during Sunday Mass. The wise woman is serenaded with a ballad about her secret poppy patch, hidden behind the leeks, or so she says. The travelling jester always closes with a tongue-in-cheek warning, "Be careful, good people, for the poppy's embrace is sweet, but don't be surprised if you wake up married to a cabbage." Sometimes, the jokes are as much about the chaos as the sleep. Skits reenact the great poppy shortage of '87, when a village was forced to survive on boiled dandelions and bedtime stories alone, nearly tearing itself apart over the last dried pod. One particularly energetic troupe puts on a mock trial. The accused, a large jug labelled poppy milk, stands before a jury of snoring villagers and is ultimately acquitted on the grounds that no one could stay awake for the verdict. Even serious poets join the fray. Travelling bards compose dreamy epics about poppy-fueled visions, or the legendary sleeper who napped through 2 kings and a sheep rebellion. The audience, sometimes drifting off mid-verse, considers this a compliment, the highest praise a medieval performer can hope for. The humour is both catharsis and commentary. Laughter makes the sluggish pace of village life more bearable, and the jokes become a shared language. Old and young alike repeat the punchlines in the fields the next day, or sing the poppy milk chorus as they grind grain. Working and joking in equal measure, the best troops know their audience. Sometimes what a sleepy village really needs isn't another miracle cure, but a good laugh about the side effects. By the end of the night, as the performers pack up and the villagers amble home, there's a sense of gratitude. The poppy jokes linger, softer than lullabies, but just as comforting. In a world that's always a little too hard, too cold, or too noisy, it's a relief to giggle about the absurdities of sleep, even if most people will forget the punchlines by morning. After all, in the age of poppy milk, a little laughter is just another way to drift off. Famine, war, or a particularly hungry herd of goats can wipe out the local poppy crop. Suddenly, sleeplessness returns, and the entire region is forced to rediscover old-fashioned, non-narcotic boredom. The first sign is a strange, unfamiliar quiet. Not the peaceful hush of a well-poppified village, but the tense, wide-eyed silence of people who know trouble is brewing. Trouble that sounds like the relentless creak of beds, the endless rustle of straw, And the ominous patter of children's feet when they're supposed to be asleep. No poppy milk tonight, no sweet relief, just a long, slow descent into the most feared malady of the age, pure, unfiltered wakefulness. At first, denial reigns. Surely someone has a stash, the villagers say. Check behind the onions. Look under the drying fish. For one hopeful hour, every kitchen is ransacked, every herb jar upended, every old boot searched for a forgotten poppy head. Nothing. Old Nan swears she remembers burying a secret supply in her garden, but all she digs up is a terrified mole and a handful of questionable roots. The wise woman's hut is besieged by desperate townsfolk offering eggs, wool, and even the family cat in exchange for a single precious mug. She sighs and offers valerian, which works for some, and a mug of boiled lettuce water, which doesn't work for anyone, ever. By sunset, reality hits. The children are cranky, the adults are jumpy, and the farm animals, picking up on the collective restlessness, seem determined to add to the chaos. The goats, perhaps sensing their role in the disaster, become escape artists, nibbling through garden fences and headbutting the chickens. The pigs stage a squealing protest in the middle of the lane. Even the cows seem to blink just a little more slowly, as if mocking everyone's failed attempts at sleep. With nothing to take the edge off, the evening drags. Suddenly, all the things usually drowned out by drowsiness are front and center. Uncle Hob's never-ending story about the time he saw a giant rat, the neighbor's impressive and deeply annoying snore, and the mysterious dripping noise that no one can ever quite locate. People remember why they used to play dice, sing long ballads, and, if desperate, listen to the priest's homily for entertainment. In place of the poppy milk ritual, new, improvised routines spring up. Someone suggests a group foot soak in cold water. Another organizes a competitive pillow fluffing, judged by who can make their straw mattress least lumpy. The local bard attempts to tell a story so boring it will knock everyone out, but accidentally sparks a heated debate about whether geese or ducks are the more dignified bird. Boredom, it turns out, is harder work than harvesting, weeding, or mending fences. Who knew? As the night wears on, tempers fray. Children bicker, parents snap, and the village dog is found cowering beneath the bread oven, refusing to emerge until the noise dies down. Desperate, some adults try to tire themselves out by sweeping the floor, scrubbing the cauldrons, or counting roof leaks. None of it helps. Every creak is a crisis. Every shadow looks like an opportunity to fall asleep. Until it isn't. When dawn breaks after a sleepless night, the village looks like the aftermath of a minor rebellion. Red-eyed, grumpy, and unified by misery, everyone stumbles through their chores, grumbling and sighing. Even the priest forgoes his usual lecture about the virtues of suffering, admitting perhaps a bit of sleep wouldn't go amiss, after all. Still, necessity is the mother of invention. By day 3, someone invents a new bedtime game called the Quietest Contest. The winner gets first pick at the next harvest, provided it ever arrives. Old pastimes return, knitting, storytelling, and watching the stars. No one enjoys them, but they're all that's left. So, if you ever hear a medieval village described as peaceful, remember, peace is relative, and nothing is more fragile or more fiercely missed than a good night's sleep, especially when the poppies run out. Historians still argue, was poppy milk a miracle, a menace, or just a medieval placebo? The answer depends on whom you ask and how much sleep they got last night. Start with the chronic insomniacs, those unfortunate souls haunted by nightly symphonies of creaking timbers, howling winds, and snoring family members with the lung capacity of bagpipes. For them, poppy milk was nothing short of a revelation. No more tossing and turning, no more staring at the soot-stained ceiling, worrying about famine, taxes, or whether the sound under the bed was a rat or just wishful thinking for a midnight snack. The first sip brought a wave of drowsy hope. The second, oblivion. These were the true believers, spreading the gospel of poppy milk like it was a medieval TED talk, complete with testimonies and wildly optimistic dosing tips. Then there were the skeptics, mostly older villagers who claimed that in their day, all you needed for a good night's sleep was hard work, a clear conscience, and a well-aimed clump of wool in the ear to drown out the neighbors. They eyed poppy milk with suspicion. What if it made you weak? Lazy? Prone to extravagant dreams about flying sheep and endless summers? Some swore it did more harm than good. Back in the old days, we suffered properly, and we liked it. These folks turned up their noses but watched enviously as the younger generation drifted off mid-argument. Of course, there was a third group, the unlucky ones who took poppy milk and still found themselves trapped in the wildest medieval nightmares. These dreams ran the gamut from the mundane, forgetting to tithe and being chased around the churchyard by a very stern bishop, to the downright absurd, being mistaken for a sheep in a peasant revolt, or accidentally inventing the fork 2 centuries early and being branded a heretic. Some villagers swore the poppy made their nightmares worse, as if all the day's worries squeezed themselves into a single, feature-length horror film, starring them, their least favorite neighbor, and, inevitably, a goat. The wise women and herbalists, those unofficial therapists of the village, always hedged their bets. Some need a mug, some need a song, and some just need to have a good cry in the cabbage patch, they'd say, carefully doling out poppy milk with advice for moderation. They saw the benefit. Fewer late-night visits from desperate parents. Fewer cases of midnight panic syndrome, also known as remembering everything embarrassing you've ever done. But they also kept a close eye on those who got too attached to the nightly ritual. After all, dependence on anything, even something as innocent as sleep, could upset the delicate balance of village life. But let's be honest. In a world where your nightmares could become reality, plague, war, mysterious oozes from the thatch, sometimes you needed more than a lullaby and an optimistic attitude. Poppy milk, for all its faults, offered an escape, a soft, blurry barrier between the weary brain and a world determined to keep you up at night. If a little placebo effect helped, so much the better. Sleep, like hope, is often as much about believing in it as actually achieving it. By morning, the village divided neatly into those who woke refreshed and those who wandered through the day in a poppy haze, unsure if the rooster crowed or if they just dreamed the sunrise. Debates continued at the well, the church, and the tavern. Some said poppy milk made the nightmares vanish. Others insisted it made them just interesting enough to talk about at breakfast. The answer, like most things in medieval England, is complicated. For some, poppy milk was a small miracle. For others, a mischievous menace. For most, a necessary part of surviving nights that were as long and unpredictable as the days. Whatever the verdict, one thing was certain. A village with poppy milk might dream stranger dreams. But at least, for a little while, it could finally rest. Some say the village elder who never woke up is still out there, dreaming of warmer summers. Others swear they once saw the ghost of a medieval sleep addict, haunting the night, looking for just one more sip. Every era has its bedtime stories. Medieval England's are just a bit more drowsy. It's no surprise, really. In a world where the border between dreams and reality is paper-thin, especially after a strong mug of poppy milk, tales of legendary sleepers drift through every village like smoke from the hearth. These are stories whispered around the embers, passed from one generation of insomniacs to the next. And just like the best bedtime tales, they're meant to comfort, to warn, and to give you a good excuse for why you can't be trusted to show up before noon. The oldest story is that of old Edric, a local elder famous for his ability to nap through anything: weddings, thunderstorms, even the Lord's annual tax inspection. They say he was the first to discover the triple-strength poppy milk recipe, a blend so potent it knocked him out for 3 days straight. When he finally woke up, he'd missed an entire harvest and gained a mysterious reputation as Edric the Restful. Some claim his spirit still lingers near the poppy fields, gently shushing rowdy children and blessing any cup that comes his way. Then there's the tale of Saint Swithin's slumber, a local legend about a holy man who prayed so hard for peace that he was gifted with an endless, dream-filled sleep. The villagers, inspired by his example, tried to replicate the miracle with varying degrees of success. For every sleepy visionary who woke up claiming to have seen angels in their dreams, there was someone else who merely dreamed of slightly less drafty socks and a breakfast with actual flavor. Ghost stories abound, too. Travelers speak in hushed tones of the White Sleeper, a ghostly figure seen wandering the roads at midnight, clutching an empty mug and moaning about one more sip. If you meet her, tradition says, you're doomed to a week of restless nights, or, in some versions, gifted with a sudden ability to nap anywhere, anytime, regardless of noise, discomfort, or social consequences. Children love to dare each other to stay up late and spot the White Sleeper, only to fall asleep halfway through the challenge. Tangled in their own blankets and dreams of sticky buns, bedtime legends often double as cautionary tales. Don't take the extra mug, parents warn, or you'll end up like Tom the Tardy, who once napped through his own wedding and awoke a bachelor in the next village over. Or, remember Hilda the Dreamer? She chased poppy milk so far she forgot how to churn butter, and the cows went on strike. The lesson is always the same. There's no harm in a little rest, but too much of a good thing can leave you missing out on the important things, like feasts, festivals, or your turn at the communal oven. But not all the myths are warnings. Some are warm, sleepy tributes to the resilience of a people who survived every hardship with a wink and a nap. Songs celebrate the heroic yawner who defeated boredom, taxes, and a particularly persistent rooster with nothing but a mug and an unwavering commitment to bedtime. Couples toast each other at anniversaries with watered-down poppy milk, joking that they'll outdo old Edric for the longest married nap title. So as darkness settles over the village and the last bedtime story winds down, every yawn is a small tribute to the legends of old. Maybe the world outside is full of danger and uncertainty, but inside, among friends and family, the greatest heroes are those who know how to rest and how to turn even the longest sleep into a story worth repeating. And somewhere, out there in the night, you just know old Edric is still snoozing, dreaming of a world where the poppy crop never fails and the mugs are always full. The rumors spread fast. Last night, the whole village missed the midnight sheep theft because everyone was out cold. Poppy milk doesn't just knock you out, it creates a special brand of medieval FOMO, the terrifying realization that, somewhere, someone might be having fun while you're drooling on your own tunic. It's the strangest sensation. You wake up after your best night's sleep in months, feeling like a new person, only to be greeted by wild stories about what you missed while you were off in dreamland. Did you hear what happened last night? Someone whispers over morning porridge. Old Tom juggled 2 chickens and a turnip in the moonlight, said he was inspired by a vision. You, meanwhile, were snoring into your straw pillow, blissfully unaware of the village's impromptu circus. This is the dark side of drowsiness. Poppy milk. Induced FOMO, or, as they might have called it, fear of missing the mildly entertaining and possibly dangerous activities of your neighbors. In an age with no Netflix, no Instagram, and precious few distractions, any nighttime excitement was a big deal. A sheep on the loose, a wandering minstrel, a spontaneous midnight dance. These events become instant legends, recounted with growing exaggeration until everyone remembers being there, even if they were drooling on their own tunic at the time. You start to second-guess your evening habits. Was it really worth drinking that second mug of poppy milk? Just to miss Lady Agatha's dramatic confession about her secret pet ferret? Could you have managed with only a half dose and kept one eye open for possible intrigue? The real nightmare is not what happens in your dreams, but what happens in the village while you're absent from the story. Some villagers try to fight back. "No poppy for me tonight," they declare, determined to witness any shenanigans firsthand. This bold stance lasts exactly until 10 p.m., when the exhaustion of a long day, a cold hut, and the memory of last week's sleep deprivation start to win out. You tell yourself you'll just rest your eyes for a minute, then wake up for the action. Next thing you know, it's sunrise, and you've missed the village's only successful attempt at synchronized snoring. There's an arms race between the sleep-deprived and the sleep-enthusiastic. The local prankster begins leaving cryptic notes. "You missed a wild night. P.S. Check your shoes." Just to stoke the flames of FOMO. Children invent elaborate tales about secret feasts and midnight treasure hunts, swearing it all happened while the grown-ups were testing the strength of the new batch. Soon, nobody trusts their own memories, and everyone starts to wonder if there's a whole other life happening after bedtime. But here's the paradox. While everyone fears missing out, nobody really wants to be the one awake when everyone else is blissfully out cold. The handful who stay up late end up wandering the silent, snoring village, feeling a strange sort of existential loneliness. What if the party really is better on the other side of sleep? The wise woman, who claims to never touch the stuff, quietly admits she sometimes wishes she could forget what she sees in the stillness of the night. Just a lot of snoring and the occasional sheep attempting to open a locked gate. By the next morning, it doesn't matter. FOMO becomes FOMOS, fear of missing out on sleep, and villagers compare notes about their dreams as if they were real adventures. "You dreamt of a flying pig? I dreamt I was mayor." Everyone laughs, stories blend together, and the line between what happened and what didn't blurs like the haze after a mug of strong poppy milk. In the end, medieval FOMO isn't so different from ours. You always think you're missing out, until you realize that sometimes the best stories are the ones you sleep through. And if you're lucky, your friends will fill in the blanks with enough absurdity to make you glad you slept at all. It starts with a gentle yawn during morning prayers, but by midday it's contagious. Soon, even the livestock are yawning. Chronic yawning sweeps the countryside. The village priest attempts to exorcise the spirit of boredom, but deep down, everyone knows it's just last night's poppy milk talking. There's nothing quite like a wave of yawns to bring a medieval community together, or, more accurately, to drag everyone down to the same bleary-eyed, slack-jawed level. It begins innocently enough. A sleepy child covers their mouth during the Lord's Prayer. An old man at the market bench lets out a heroic, jaw-cracking yawn, and a neighbor follows suit, unable to resist. Within minutes, it's everywhere, a domino effect of drowsiness. The baker yawns into the dough, the blacksmith yawns over his anvil, and the milkmaid nearly dozes off mid-milking. Much to the confusion of a cow who thought she'd seen it all. You try to fight it, but it's hopeless. One yawn leads to another, and soon you're locked in a feedback loop of public exhaustion. The wise woman claims it's sympathetic magic. The reeve blames bad air from the north. The local children insist it's because of the boring stories at bedtime, but they're just annoyed their parents stopped telling tales about heroic knights and switched to the history of turnip farming, Volume 3. As the day drags on, productivity falls to an all-time low. The thatcher forgets to finish half the roof, the shepherds nap on the hillside, and a small group of geese stage a coo while the guards are nodding off. People start to joke that the village should change its coat of arms to a pillow and 2 crossed mugs. The chronic yawning crisis is so pronounced that even the livestock get involved. Sheep, chickens, and goats, caught mid-yawn, look like they're participating in some ancient ritual of shared fatigue. The priest, desperate to restore order and his authority, launches a crusade against this wave of weariness. He tries everything: extra-long sermons about vigilance, passionate hymns at twice the usual tempo, and, when all else fails, a ceremonial attempt to exorcise the demon of sleep. He waves incense, sprinkles holy water, and shouts, "Begone, spirit of boredom!" Half the congregation nods solemnly, half dozes off where they sit. The demon, if it ever existed, is probably too tired to care. Not everyone is amused. The village healer is bombarded with requests for remedies: sage tea, bitter roots, vinegar foot baths, or anything that might snap people out of their stupor. "Try chewing this," she says, handing out twigs of something suspicious. "If it doesn't wake you up, at least you'll stop talking about how tired you are." Some villagers start inventing elaborate rituals: cold water splashes, standing on one leg, or group recitations of tongue twisters, all in a doomed attempt to break the cycle. But the real cause isn't a spirit, a curse, or even a poorly told bedtime story. It's the poppy milk. Every household, every cottage, every hut tucked away on the edge of the fields. Everyone's sipping the stuff. The resulting mornings are slow, the afternoons sluggish, and the evenings spent inventing new ways to pretend you're alert. Chronic yawning becomes the new normal, a shared joke and a silent truce. As long as everyone's tired, no one has the energy to complain about it. Still, it has its upsides. People argue less, too exhausting. The village gossip slows to a trickle. No one can remember the juicy details. And for once, there's actual peace at the communal oven. In fact, some say chronic yawning brought more harmony than any law or sermon ever could. So, if you ever find yourself in a medieval village beset by endless yawns and half-hearted attempts at wakefulness, don't worry. It's not a crisis, it's a coping mechanism, a side effect of chasing sleep in a world that never gives enough. And if the livestock start yawning too, just take it as a sign you're all in this together. Every region had one, the legendary sleeper who could down 3 mugs of poppy milk and not wake up for a week. Was he a wizard, a medical marvel, or just really avoiding chores? His story lives on, whispered in awe by parents who desperately want their kids to nap. The great sleeper of Shropshire, his real name lost to history. Or maybe just intentionally forgotten by a family eager to dodge questions about inheritance, became the benchmark for slumber across medieval England. They say he once nodded off during the solstice festival, face planted gently in a pie, and didn't stir even as the Morris dancers tripped over him. When he finally woke, he blinked, stretched, and declared, "Did I miss supper?" The answer was yes, and also breakfast, lunch, and 2 feasts. Legends grew with every retelling. Some said he was a distant cousin of Merlin, blessed with the power of endless rest. Others insisted he'd made a deal with the local wise woman. "Give me sleep, and I'll never complain about the turnip crop again." There were rumors of secret sleep techniques, deep breathing, meditation, the careful layering of poppy milk with honey and mint. Most likely, he was just tired. Very tired. Every parent in Shropshire, and well beyond, wished for a drop of the great sleeper's magic. "Go to bed, or you'll never be as good as the great sleeper," they'd warn, as their own children launched into another round of late-night wrestling matches with the family dog. His legend was the gold standard. If your child slept through church, market day, or the neighbor's bagpipe practice, you could brag. She takes after the great sleeper and instantly win the Bedtime Olympics. Of course, the grown-ups weren't immune to the myth. The laziest villagers invoked his name whenever caught napping during daylight hours. "Just channeling the spirit of Shropshire's best," they'd say, tucking straw over their heads and pretending not to hear the shouts for help with the hay cart. The more ambitious even staged friendly competitions. How many mugs could you drink before missing a full week? No one ever beat the record, but plenty tried. And the annual Shropshire Slumber-Off became a surprisingly popular village event. The winner received a crown woven from poppy stems and the dubious honor of being allowed to skip morning chores for a day, or until someone remembered to wake them up. Children especially were fascinated. The great sleeper became the subject of bedtime stories and schoolyard dares. "If you drink 3 mugs, you'll see all the saints in your dreams," one boy whispered. "If you drink 4, you'll sleep until Christmas," added his friend, whose understanding of time was a little fuzzy. Sometimes, the local priest would try to use the legend as a warning, "Sloth is a sin, remember." But even he had to admit that, in a world of endless toil, a little extra sleep sounded more like heaven than hell. No legend would be complete without a few ghostly twists. Some villagers claimed that, on foggy nights, you could spot the great sleeper's shadow drifting through the lanes, searching for a quiet spot to rest. Others swore his snores could still be heard echoing through the poppy fields on calm evenings. A reminder that rest, once found, was something worth holding on to. In the end, the great sleeper's story is less about laziness and more about longing, a dream of peace, comfort, and escape from the grinding gears of medieval life. He was a symbol of hope, a touchstone for the weary, and a bedtime hero for every parent who wished, just once, that their children would sleep through the night. And maybe, just maybe, he's still out there, catching up on his dreams while the rest of us envy his talent, one nap at a time. So tonight, as you stretch out in a real bed, behind real walls, with modern comforts and zero risk of accidentally bartering your pillow for a mug of medieval NyQuil, maybe whisper a thank you to the nappers, the dreamers, and the accidental inventors of England's original sleep aid. You don't have to scrape mud from your mattress, share your bedroom with livestock, or pray your nighttime beverage won't put you in a 48-hour coma. Because history is often a parade of suffering, silliness, and miraculous survival. But it's also proof that humans, for all our faults, will do almost anything for a little rest. So close your eyes, breathe deep, and let the noise of the present fade away. May your dreams tonight be free of straw, goats, and suspicious beverages, and may your only addiction be to peaceful sleep. Good night, and good luck.